Good afternoon. My name is Courtney Carr, and today we'll be discussing educational and school psychology and why they adhere to the ecological model versus the medical model. The table of contents lists the topics we will be discussing today. Intro to the ecological model and systems theory, Yuri Bronfenbrenner and his bioecological model of mental health, a study which tested the ecological model in primary schools, the medical model and how it is still very present in special education, and finally, ecological psychology and how it should be replacing the medical model in education. To begin this assignment, I had to research the ecological model and what it was so I could gain a basic understanding on the views and ideas surrounding the concept. So let's start by defining some terms. The ecological model is an evolutionary adaptive view of humans and how they adjust to their environment. It also involves accommodation, which is when a person interacts with their environment to develop a best fit to maintain homeostasis. To survive, humans must adapt to their environment and make changes to find a new homeostasis. Next, let's define the biophysical model, which is an expansion of the ecological model. It sees disease as an interaction between environment, physical, behavioral, psychological, and social factors. Also, it holds the belief that social, cultural, and economic conditions have a significant effect on health. Moreover, it stresses a multidisciplinary approach to effectively solving community health problems. Lastly is systems theory. It helps us to understand the complex interaction between the three levels of systems. The micro, which is the individual, such as personality traits, genetics, mental and physical predispositions, and current conditions. The meso, which is family, things like culture, religion, size, single parents, divorced parents, blended families, income, and education. And the macro, or the community, being location, population size, rural versus urban, minority groups, opportunities for growth, the value of fine arts, science, and technology, resources for healthcare, and access to higher education. Our next slide discusses Yuri Bronfenbrenner and his bioecological model for mental health. Yuri was the co-founder of Head Start, a pre-K program for underprivileged children. He's a developmental psychologist and leading researcher in child rearing and human ecology. He stresses most the importance of social environments along with a holistic approach to human psychology. He has argued against the medical model most of his career. He has stated that seeing mental illness merely as a chemical imbalance is too simplistic. Also, he emphasized that basing mental health treatment on the medical model is outdated and lacking. Moreover, merely diagnosing and then prescribing medication is convenient for doctors and only treats symptoms or acts like a band-aid to cover surface-level problems. It doesn't get at the function or root of the problem. Furthermore, it's easier for the patients because they often lack the effort needed to change their situation or environment. Bronfenbrenner notes how this model is important to educators. He states that educators should be aware of this model when they talk to parents about referring the child to district specialists or pediatricians. Depending on which way the parents decide to solve the problem might influence what model, ecological or medical, is used. Also, he indicates early family interaction is the basis for many behaviors seen at school, as a foundation for childhood has been laid when the child enters school at the age of 5 or 6. Additionally, he expressed how family is the link between the child and the school, which is micro, as well as the child and society, or macro. The author gives evidence for why the medical model prevails in educational research and child psychiatry. Mostly it is due to big pharmaceutical companies, referred to as Big Pharma, and their funding for research and wanting their drugs pushed for profit. Moreover, it is argued that most of this research is not likely to lead to a cure, but merely better band-aids for mental disorders. Our next slide will look at the study conducted to see how the ecological model affects resilience in primary schools. In psychology, resilience is defined as an individual's ability to successfully adapt to life tasks in the face of social disadvantage or highly adverse conditions. Therefore, the authors wanted to see if implementing an ecological model, or what they call health-promoting school, would increase the resilience in students. The method for the study used 20 schools from Australia, 10 schools to use the HSP model, and 10 as a control group who did not use the HSP model. They compared resilience scores and protective factors amongst these schools. Baseline data was taken to view the interaction effect of these two values. After the intervention was completed, they again collected data to see if there was any change in the interaction effect. The results indicated baseline data to have no significant interaction between the two values for resistance and protective factors. After 18 months of intervention, Data for the HSP group showed students to have significantly higher results on 4 factors. These factors include family connection, community connection, peer support, and overall resilience. The conclusion of the study showed students who attended schools who implemented the HSP model had significantly higher results than those in the control group. Also, protective factors and resilience can be improved by using an HSP model which integrates students, staff, and the community. This brings us to our next slide and how the medical model is still very present in special education and why this is the case. To start, authors state it is used in diagnosis and educational treatment for children with disabilities. Often students receive a medical diagnosis based on psychological and physiological impairments. Then, strengths and weaknesses are determined for intervention and training purposes. The medical model views all learning problems as a function of disease or disorder. Also, it assumes comprehensive diagnosis of physical, neurological, and biological means. In theory, this should be completed before intervention in educational settings. However, that is not always the case, which indicates why it's a potential problem. Moreover, the medical model sees the primary cause of handicapped conditions to be neurological dysfunction, biological errors, genetic factors, and environmental factors, but only as they relate to biology, i.e., drugs, alcohol, or pollution. Also, it stresses the need of the individual and what the individual needs for their environment. Therefore, the individual needs to be treated for their medical condition. Those who adhere to the medical model believe educators and medical personnel should consult to best address the student's needs, meaning when assigning educational treatment, it is assumed it is based on a medical diagnosis. Furthermore, educational training methods should be based on a biological, psychological perspective. This helps to keep the focus on sensory stimulation and appropriate perceptual organization. Obviously, there are problems with this model, which brings us to our next slide. Ecological psychology and how and why the switch should be made from the medical model in education. Let's review the medical model on a larger scale. Often, it focuses on treatment of the individual, not the population. Also, it neglects early intervention and prevention. Moreover, it relies heavily on remediation and treatment, which has led to a lack of healthcare providers along with insufficient and ineffective treatments. Consequently, this has caused pandemics in youth and school-aged children, i.e., lack of vaccines. Now, let's review the importance of the ecological model. It aids to solve issues of pandemic proportions and focus on educating populations as a whole. Topics for discussion should include access to treatment for mental illness, the effects mental illness has on children, and the gaps of achievement and how they only grow with time. The ecological model will emphasize prevention and intervention rather than crisis management. It stresses the need to learn early signs and symptoms to get early intervention, which is proven effective in treatment for students with disabilities. Here's why the authors proposed the switch. 1. It allows researchers to focus on intervention which can be used in small groups, classrooms, campuses, and district-wide with emphasis on environmental factors. 2. We can use limited resources, state funding, more effectively on prevention techniques rather than disaster cleanup. 3. Educators shouldn't wait until a child has failed, but stress early intervention, allowing students the chance to succeed rather than trying to bridge the learning gap. Thanks for watching. Please comment below with any questions.